Greetings ladies and mental gents, and welcome to my channel, where I like to make audio narrations of various stories from the internet. In this video, we will be focusing on a story from the subreddit HFY, called Food for Thought Part 6. The link to the original story will be in the description down below. And, as always, I hope that you enjoy. Only 3 things can kill a UCH Marine: a lieutenant with a map, friendly fire, and a D-ration chocolate bar. Unnamed UCH Marine Corporal. Ask any officer in the fleet what the most dangerous thing on a ship is, and they'll almost always tell you that it's an NCO with nothing to do. Ask them the same question of a non-com, and they'll usually say it's an LT with a map. Luckily for Shipmaster Thurus, Petty Officer Krevnikov had plenty to keep him busy aboard the Blood of Many. It wasn't that humanity's ability to keep himself occupied that concerned the honor shipmaster, though. His daughter's behavior was troublesome. Reports of the human's first cooked meal and the effects that it had on the crew were unusual, and worst of all, the master Cherigine had called him regarding the analysis of the edibles that the human had brought aboard. Something about an assassin-class toxin. He returned the salutes and gestured out of respect from his crew as he strode through the halls, his tail swaying back and forth comfortably. Being shipmaster had its perks, especially at his age and size. Others moved out of his way quickly and without complaint. Younger and lower-ranked staff watched their feet, and the shipmaster was going somewhere. It was far more important than wherever they were going. Thurus lifted his gaze to check the signage with the intersection and looked to the sudden left to avoid a cleaning delay that was posted up ahead. He knew his ship like his own scales, every nook, every cranny, every spot where couples slipped away or civilians could hide contraband. Not that such things happened often. Not on his ship. The problem with having a lack of problems is to worry about, though, is that when there is a problem you have far more worrying available to give you. By the time Thurus had reached the stark green doorway marked as the heating den, he could almost feel his feathers falling out. He liked the human so far. He was respectful, eager to learn, quick to act. And if the early reports were true, his skill as a pretender would be the stuff of legends. The thought of his guest being an assassin made his stomach turn. He found himself hoping that this was all a simple misunderstanding. A bit of foodstuffs that was edible for the humans, but not his kind. When he strode into the chamber and turned his gaze to the central pillar display, his heart sank. The compound in question was highlighted in red. He didn't need the Emerald Road Cherigians to tell him what the stuff was and what it meant. An assassin's poison, difficult to obtain, harder to utilize. Violent, deadly, though. The shipmaster steeled himself and turned to the nearby wall console and opened a connection to the security hall. Security, Nest Hall 6. Please retrieve our human guest and escort him to the holding cell immediately. Looking back at the floating hologram, Thurus turned to strode to medical and turned down the hallway. Whatever respect he had for the human was put aside. He was the shipmaster Thurlisons, and the elder sire of the Hastened Brood, keeper of the Condra, tempered in the heat of war and the blood of 100 battles, each 100 worlds. He did not suffer the barbarisms of the Death Star. He did not suffer the dishonor of his own brother. He would not suffer an assassin on his ship. Recklow watched the human with an amused smirk as she dressed. The human was struggling to put together a piece of the tool rack for some sort. The array of wooden implements and cookware scattered about the mess cupboard and foam packing sheets. He had been working on getting his personal space up to his standards for the last 12 hours while Recklow watched and preened. Occasionally the female would send a scathing remark and backhand a compliment his way to try and provoke a reaction from him. It was a surprise to both when the door opened without warning. Recklow snapped her head with a snarl, and about to sink her teeth into whoever was that dared to intrude without announcing themselves. But the sight of the security uniform snuffed her anger out quickly. Alex looked up from his work and stood up as the 4 armored aliens filed in. Alexander Krevnikov, by order of the shipmaster, you are to accompany us at once, the squad leader said firmly. The human felt a hair on his neck stand up. He shifted his feet apart and considered his options. He could feel Recklow staring at him now. 2 of the troopers were armed with what looked like oversized slug rifles, and a 4th was holding bindings of some kind. I have a right to know what the charges are against me if I'm being arrested," he replied, trying to look as relaxed as possible, while getting ready for a confrontation. The leader gave a nod in agreement. "You were accused of bringing an assassin's poison on board with the intent to murder." Alex barely got a chance to register his shock at the accusation when he heard the blood-chilling roar from across the room. Something primal kicked in and told him to run. "You traitorous son of a siren!" Azrekahl was across the room in a flash, slamming herself into the human and knocking him to the floor, snapping and snarling at him with a blind rage, swiping to try and get her claws past his attempted blocks. The petty officer fell back on instinct and muscle memory. He jammed a thick wooden spoon forward to back off her jaws, desperate to keep her teeth from getting at his head. He dodged and slugged as her claws raked at the floor beside him. The heat from her breath washed over his face, her snarl distorted by a piece of wood that was keeping her jammed against the back of her jaws. She felt her knees coming up against her sides in a little effort as she tried to use her tongue to pry the damned bit out of her way. She knew that he was not to be trusted. She knew he was without honor. She always knew, and now, with her father's accusation, she could finally be rid of him. Her head pulled back slightly as she closed her jaw hard. Once, twice, 3 times, before the spoon snapped in half, leaving him only defenseless. He felt the hot iron breath wash over his face. Copper eyes bored into his soul. Sunburned skin and a wounded ear filled his vision. Where was the chief? Where was Robert? Alex reached for something else, desperate to defend himself as she dove back at him for the kill. He felt something cold and rough in his hand, gripped it and swung. Someone nearby rang a gong for some reason, but more importantly, the weight of the alien female was off of him. His relief was short-lived though, as a new set of claws grabbed his body. The security team had jumped in. Azrekahl was being held down by the squad leader, his arm around her muzzle to keep her jaws shut, while another stood with his rifle. Alex rolled over and quickly bound, despite his attempts to keep fighting on instinct. "Stand down, Red Alpha. The shipmaster wants him for interrogation." The security lead snarled, waiting until the female stopped struggling before letting her go. "You'll have to come with us as well. Your outburst must be reported." Azrekahl snarled, and then armed Sabari shouldered their weapon. The female cooperated, though, despite her clear displeasure. "Very well," she said, standing and offering her arms. The team lead shook his head and simply nudged her to start walking as the others fell into formation. Azrekahl in front with the squad leader, Alex and his escort, and the 2 rifle-wielding troopers falling in behind. The human had fallen quiet and simply stared ahead as he was led through the ship. He ignored the curious stares of the crew that he was just begun to meet. His mind was filled with protocol and procedure. What to say, what to do, what to think. As far as he was concerned, he was a prisoner of war now. His changes made no sense. Poison? Assassination? He racked his mind trying to figure out what this was all about. He'd been framed. His eyes went to the back of Azrekahl's head. Could she have done something? Would she? He turned to gaze past her, staring straight ahead. He would worry about that later. Right now his focus had to be on what came next. Security had said interrogation. That would be the easy part. He didn't think that the Sabari, a race so dependent on honor, would resort to torture. Then again, the first tenant made it clear that those without honor were animals, nothing more. They might have no qualms about such actions on being they considered so low. When they arrived at the security area, he and Azrekahl were separated. Azrekahl was led through a door into an adjacent room, while Alex was led down the line of empty cells before being pushed into one near the back. Once inside, he turned and watched as the particle field crackled into place over the thick metal bars that kept him in. The 2 armed guards took positions on either side of his cell to keep an eye on him. With his hands bound and the cell solidly locked down, all Alex could do was sit down and wait. He'd get his answers eventually. One way or another, he only hoped that all this mess was a simple misunderstanding. A snarling roar was heard down the hall that made his stomach drop. Thrus took a slow breath to stretch his lungs after the roar. He was confident that his daughter understood the reason for this one. As a leader of his people, the shipmaster was bound by duty to deliver such a disciplinary actions, even if he did agree with the offense. His daughter was once again showing her submission to his will, and genuinely seemed to understand her fault. Rise, Dread Alpha. You acted with an honorable intent, but do not allow your emotions to guide your teeth again. The human will die by my order alone. Recklow straightened and saluted. I understand, Shipmaster. I will redeem myself however you see fit. She spoke only somewhat earnestly. In truth, she wished she had been able to tear Alex's throat out before the security intervened, and by the look of her father's eyes, she did not think that he'd object too harshly if she had done so. Good. Now come with me. The Dishonored One has seen your fury, and we will use this to learn the truth. Thuras turned to wave for the doors to be opened. Recklow blinked twice and then hurried to catch up. She was a little confused, but the thought of having another go at the fleshy pink biped brought an eager flick to her tail. The pair stepped through into the cell block, passing the empty chambers until coming to a stop in front of the human. The prisoner stood stoically silent, his arms crossed bound in his chest and his eyes staring straight ahead. The two guards moved away and turned to keep their weapons trained on Alex as the shipmaster lowered the shield. If they had expected Alex to try and escape or fight his way out, they found themselves disappointed. The petty officer simply stood there, at ease. Eyes forward, lips shut. Recklow snarled and lashed her tail threateningly, lurched forward against the bars, snapping at her jaws. Alex flinched, but remained stoic. Human, you've brought dishonor upon yourself. Thuras growled, the male stepping forward to stand next to his daughter. You sought to deceive us, to earn our trust, as you bring a murderous poison aboard my ship. You will tell me your plans. It is how your leaders sought to greet us, with coward's death. Krivnikov Alexander, Petty Officer, First Class, serial number 2203-22110-2234-CAN-0003. Alex replied firmly, not moving his stare from his chosen spot. The female snarled at him again and slammed her tail against the bars. Speak the truth, human. Tell us what we wish, or I will rip your heart out. Krivnikov Alexander, Petty Officer, First Class, serial number 2203-22110-2234-CAN-0003. Thuras gave a rumbling growl and tapped an icon on his arm computer. This game will not save you, traitor. We have already found the poison hidden in the food that you brought with you. Admit to the crime and you will be spared the coward's execution. Krivnikov Alexander, Petty Officer, First Class, serial number... This time it was Thuras who slammed against the cell bars. Enough of this! You wish to further insult us. You wish to remain silent. Very well, then you will taste the very death you sought to bring upon us. Alexander shifted his eyes to stare down the shipmaster defiantly. When he replied, he spoke slow, clearly, and with conviction. Krivnikov Alexander, Petty Officer, First Class, serial number 2203-222110-2234-CAN-0003. The shipmaster huffed and stepped back, gesturing for Recklow to do the same. The door at the end of the hall opened again, and the emerald-clothed Chirurgian approached, carrying a tray with a small, squat can on it. Alex's heart raced. This was it. This was how he died, forced to eat a poison that he was accused of smuggling on board. Part of him told him to run, or fight, or flee, or die trying. Alex held his stance. He wasn't going to back away from this. Not after all that he'd been through. He'd heard the Chirurgian draw closer. His mind went blank to his life so far. His family back on Earth, the friends and the comrades that he'd met and lost through his career, the things that he'd seen and done, the things that he hadn't done. His eyes closed, his lips moving into a silent lost prayer as the clicking of claws on the metal stopped. The human took a deep breath and opened his eyes. What he saw stunned him. He couldn't hide his surprise and his face, and he wouldn't have tried otherwise. He tore his eyes from the tray and looked between the 5 aliens and then back to the metal tin. This is a joke, right? He asked, not really understanding what was going on anymore. This whole thing is some kind of hazing thing. You do this to all your new recruits, right? He could tell that the unamused and confused looks of the captors that no, this was a very real and very serious. Thuras bared his teeth and with further insults. Dishonorable whelp, even at the end, you insult us. Eat. Enjoy your last meal that is meant for us. He instructed, taking the tin and shoving it forward. One of the guards stepped in and tapped the icon to release Alex's arms before returning to their position. Alex tried again to find any clue that this whole thing was a big joke, waiting for one of them to burst out laughing or for the big banner to say, "Surprise!" But it never came. He reached out and took the tin and, using 2 fingers, scooped up a big wad of the contents into his mouth, and he swallowed with the first slow mouthful. He dug in and cleaned out the tin before offering it back. "I don't see what the big deal is, sir. It tastes fine. Date's still good on it. Could use some mayo." The Sabari watched him with a stunned shock, Reckler muttering something along the lines of "impossible," though the translator didn't quite pick up it properly. The Churigan was first to speak up. How? The steel blood should have killed him in seconds. Looking at the doctor, "Steel blood? What is that?" he asked, lowering his arms. The male eyed his superiors for a moment before stepping forward and bringing up a holographic image of what he assumed was an overly complicated atom. He was a cook and a soldier, not a chemist. Seeing the hologram, or the Sabari name for it, didn't do anything to answer his question. Fortunately, the display on the translator picked up an image and it hopefully told him what he was looking at. 500 years, and we're still paying for this, Alex muttered as the realization dawned on him. He looked down at the empty tin and shook his head. "I know what's going on now, Shipmaster, and it's not what you think." End of Part 6. If you enjoyed this story and wish to support the author, the link is down below. If you would like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so. They will also be listed in the description down below. But the easiest way to help this channel is to share it, subscribe, and like. And, as always, I will see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one. Cheers!